It's decision day for Benjamin Sesko. He needs to choose to join Newcastle United today, or they may well move on to different targets. In this episode of NUFC Transfer Daily, we'll be looking at what that means for Newcastle going forward, for Alexander Isak, and also touching on reports that Newcastle are looking to go back in for Marc Guehi once again. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Welcome back to this very new setup as well. If you haven't already, please do hit the subscribe button and the thumbs up on the video. Today is all about Benjamin Sesko and his decision day. Newcastle have really put pressure on him to make a decision because they've raised their bid. RB Leipzig had set a price of around £65 million plus add-ons. Newcastle have now raised that to £70 million effectively, straight up, and £10 million in potential add-ons, which is really sort of big play. And I think Newcastle have learned a lot from the João Pedro situation and the Hugo Ekitike situation. If you allow rival clubs to sort of enter the picture, then it can be dangerous, and that's what's happened in the past. That's what Newcastle are looking to avoid with Cesco. In my mind, as I've said so many times, I feel like Newcastle are fighting a losing battle when it comes to Cesco because he wants to join Manchester United. Newcastle have been speaking to him for 2 whole weeks basically now, and all he had to do was really accept the deal. And I think really, although Newcastle had that bid rejected, or had that bid not accepted, should I say, and they've gone back in with the second one, all of the sort of monetary situation with Leipzig was never going to be a problem. Because it was all to do with Cesco's choice, and Manchester United are apparently, their response has been they will bid to Leipzig if Cesco chooses them. But maybe Newcastle will hope that it's a little bit too late for that, because can they or will they match such a high offer for Cesco? And lots of people are saying that it's overpaying, and lots of people are saying that it's not worth it. But in Newcastle's situation, they need a top quality replacement for Alexander Isak, and that's the price you've got to pay. I mean, it's only just more, really, in real terms. I know that the add-ons are on there, but I would imagine those add-ons are probably quite difficult to achieve. Certainly, I'd hope from a Newcastle perspective that they're not just sort of appearance-based, they're more trophy-based or qualification-based. So the strong fee is really £70 million, €80 million. Will Manchester United match that? That's difficult. That's a difficult question to answer when they are apparently not 100% sure they can afford the deal anyway. Newcastle have upped the ante and really made Manchester United come to the table now, because Leipzig will not reduce the fee on a club that Cesco wants to join. And it's not that he doesn't necessarily want to join Newcastle. I've never said that. It's that he may want to join Manchester United more, which is fine, because as I say, I've said previously that Newcastle signed Anthony Gordon and Bruno Guimaraes and Sandro Tonali and Alexander Isak against no real competition. If bigger clubs are in the serious end of the competition for those players, I think it'd be difficult to sign them. So the reality is that Newcastle need to sign players when they've got no competition. If they've been able to blow the competition out of the water in terms of Manchester United, then that's a real positive thing. I wouldn't say it's over yet. I think Cesco still has to make that call, and my feeling is that he doesn't necessarily want to rule out Manchester United for as long as he can. There's obviously Christopher Vivell, who's in the recruitment team at Manchester United, was previously sporting director at Red Bull Group, where he took Cesco from Salzburg to Leipzig. So there's a relationship there. So this is not over yet, and I think he does really want Manchester United. But if he's not allowed that choice, I think he will choose Newcastle, and that's a positive from a Newcastle perspective, because it allows them then to have the stronger hand with Alexander Isak. Now, there's a bit of a fear in terms of some Newcastle fans who are concerned what would happen with Isak, I think, and Liverpool and the power play there if Newcastle have Cesco, because do they need to sell Isak? And the answer is probably no. I think they don't need to, but compared to when they were trying to buy Ekitike for a year to play alongside Isak, I think the acceptance, because since that's happened, Isak's made this big play to leave, and he's agitated, and he's not gone on the tour, and all of this negativity has arisen. I think that there's an acceptance within the club that he will go, and he probably should go. But I would still not make it easier for Liverpool. I'd still make them pay that 150 million or whatever they deem acceptable, and effectively prepare if they can get Cesco in. Because I'm surprised if they get Cesco in before Isak. I've always said that as well. I didn't expect that to happen, but if that can happen, then surely you prepare, on the face of it at least, for Isak and Cesco in the way you were preparing for Isak and Ekitike, and see what that means for the centre midfield situation, because we've discussed that here. I've written a piece on Forbes as well about the midfield situation, how that needs to be seen as a priority this summer when it isn't. And lots of people are talking about goalkeeper, which is now solved with Ramsdale coming in, centre-back, right midfielder, obviously there's Alanga, and a second striker behind Isak or a replacement for Isak. There's got to be a midfielder in there as well. But if Newcastle were able to keep Isak and Cesco in, even as a sort of front initially, and maybe get a sort of younger centre-back in, I think I would take that, and maybe not going for someone like Johan Visser. I know that's probably an unpopular opinion. I know there's some people in the comment section who are desperate to see Isak leave now because of what's happened, but I think it would be, the way that people responded for the few days that it was possible that Newcastle could get Ekitike and Isak in together, the fear that put into other teams, and the way that perceived Newcastle's ambition, I think that would be huge if they could do that. But that isn't realistic at this stage. Being totally honest, I think Newcastle have accepted that if Cesco comes in, Isak goes. But today is a crucial day. You may be watching this knowing what's happened, and maybe I'll pop on later for an update if something huge happens today. But it feels like now, despite being told for so long that 48 hours and 24 hours were going to be huge, it really does feel like those 48 hours are going to be huge, the next ones, and we'll see what happens with the striker situation, because it's, as I've said previously, it's either Cesco or Isak. The great thing about Newcastle in terms of that situation is that they will not end up with neither. There's no situation where they have to sell Isak. Isak turned up to the training ground yesterday. There's no suggestion at this stage that he won't turn up to a training session. He's got to have talks with Eddie Howe. We'll see how all that plays out, obviously. But if Isak can be reintegrated, then it gives Newcastle that strength of hand if they fail to get Cesco, if Cesco's going to sit out and wait for Manchester United. But my biggest worry about Cesco is the fact that he's been so committed to waiting and not choosing between effectively what is a real bid Newcastle are on the table and Manchester United, who may well come to the table and are looking at the situation and not having bid. Now the situation is up the ante, and if Manchester United don't come to the table, it's Cesco's choice is Newcastle or Leipzig, and Leipzig want to sell him to rejig their own squad as well. So it feels like it could be a big swing in Newcastle's direction, just because can Manchester United come back with an answer? Do they want to come back with an answer? We'll find all that out today. Newcastle now in a really strong position, it feels like, with Cesco, because of last night's development of that new bid. And the bid is effectively really the same monetary-wise, at least immediately. It's just more upfront than it was before. And I think that was really, we talked about the structure and maybe sell on and some certain things like add-ons. It wasn't a big deal that Newcastle didn't have that first bid accepted. It was just a sort of case of, well, we'll see where this goes. And I think Leipzig really are open to that sale now to Newcastle. It's just whether Cesco wants to make that choice. But that's been the case for 2 weeks, really. And he hasn't made that choice. If he made that choice 2 weeks ago, it may be that he's through the door and Isak's in red now. But who knows? We'll see what happens with the striker situation. Obviously, then attention will turn to what happens with the second striker. Do Newcastle go in for Johan Visser? Do they go in for Ollie Watkins? There's plenty of other options out there as well in that sort of position. Rodrigo Muniz has been discussed. But big news last night in terms of Cesco, and it feels like that decision is very much on the horizon. You may be aware of it by the time you're watching this. I'm hoping to not be pod bombed today. I'm hoping to get the video out in plenty of time before the announcement is made or the next development comes through. But if it does come through later, I may well jump on and do another update video. Let me know in the comment section if you think Cesco will join and you're excited for the idea that Cesco may join. Big news last night, and I'm, in an ideal world, I'd love to see Isak and Cesco together. I think everybody would. But the reality is that Newcastle have accepted this. The position isn't the same that it was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when they were chasing Ekitike, because Isak has now made this play, and I think the idea is to get Cesco in to replace Isak and then get Visser or somebody else alongside as well. So let me know what you think in the comment section. We'll talk a little bit about Marc Guehi as well, because the Times reported yesterday that Newcastle is still very much interested in that deal, and I said, I think the other day, that this is something I would at least explore in the meantime. Liverpool are recalibrating on their situation with the centre-back, even though their fans seem to think that it's as important, if not more important, than Isak. And they're really focused at the moment on Isak. 130, 150 million pound bids, those deals are not normal. So clubs have to really think about what's going to happen. They're needing to sell Darwin Núñez as well. They're not focused on Marc Guehi, and maybe there's a situation, again, it could end up like the Ekitike situation where Guehi wants to wait for Liverpool, and that's absolutely fine. But Newcastle should absolutely ask the question, and if they can get that deal done very quickly, then they should really try and go for it, because Guehi and Cesco together as an incoming, which is very, very possible even without Isak going, I think in the short term, would transform the summer alongside Ramsdale and Elanga. There's 4 players with high ceilings and or Premier League experience. So that really does make the summer look a lot better. It's one of those plug-in-and-play players in defence, which is also crucial as well. Last summer, Guehi really was keen on Newcastle, I think, but he didn't force it in the way that Isak has and other players often do. Whether he'd be interested with Liverpool also hovering around, that's a very, very difficult question to answer. Only he knows what the answer is to that question. But I think Newcastle should definitely make that play and definitely see what the situation is there. And if they can get that deal done quickly, because Crystal Palace aren't going to be a problem. Yes, they maybe want 45, 50 million, which is a lot of money to pay for a player who has got a year left in his contract. But at the same time, the fact that he would just slot into that defence and completely change it, he would be that high-level, pacey, powerful player with leadership at the back who could play on either side as well. He could play left or right alongside Burns, Schär, Botman. It takes the pressure off Botman needing to be fit all the time as well. Obviously, ideally, we'd love Botman to play alongside Marc Guehi, but he just would transform that centre-back situation, I think, and it's a very easy deal to do on the face of it in terms of Palace and, you know, being able to offer the amount of money. The complication would come if Marc Guehi was so committed to waiting for Liverpool. That's just a question, though. You just got to ask the agent and just explore it. Maybe they have, I don't know. But that's why I think Newcastle will still be in the race for Marc Guehi. When they get a player in their minds, especially somebody that they bid so intensely for at any stage, they never really let go. We've seen that with João Pedro and Hugo Ekitike, went to other clubs and Newcastle still maintained their interest. So Marc Guehi does make sense. I've said that quite a lot of times over the recent weeks. Let me know in the comment section what you think about Marc Guehi and Benjamin Sesko. Do you think Newcastle could still keep Isak and Cesco, or would you rather Newcastle sold Isak, got the money in now, he went to Liverpool and Newcastle bought Johan Visser and maybe a midfielder? Let me know in the comment section what you think. But things do feel like they're moving a little bit more in a positive direction, but because of the way the summer's gone so far, nobody should be counting any chickens until deals are done. That is for sure. Thanks so much for joining me on today's episode. Like, share and subscribe. Hopefully I'll be back tomorrow and not later with another big, huge update. And hopefully this episode doesn't get made completely irrelevant in the next 5 or 10 minutes once I've uploaded it, because that seems to have happened a lot in the last couple of weeks. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.